Welcome everyone to the Unboxing Careers podcast, where we shed light on what different careers are really like so that you can choose a career you'll really love. Today we're diving into hobbies and leisure with puzzle maker Jodi Jill. But before we do, let's talk briefly about unboxing thoughtful gifts. At thoughtfulcollection.com, you can shop from a wide selection of curated products you can feel good about, helping you express friendship, gratitude, and love. The next time you need to, don't just gift, give thoughtfully at thoughtfulcollection.com. All right, I'd like to welcome to the show Jodi Jill, puzzle maker and founder of National Puzzle Day. Jodi, welcome to the Unboxing Careers podcast. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. This is a joy to share what I do every day with people. It's a great idea.
So as I started this, not in a million years would I have thought a puzzle maker would be on the show. So this is kind of cool. It's a little break from the traditional norm we're doing here. So I love it. So let's start with this maybe. Tell the audience a little bit about types of puzzles you create, because there's a whole variety of them, from jigsaw to anything. So types of puzzles you create and kind of how you create them or go about the process of creating them, maybe.
Cool. Well, there's 900 different kinds of puzzles you can make. And thankfully, I don't make all of those, which is good because I'd be busy all the time. I make word teasers, word games. I make crossword puzzles, different types of word searches. I also make online puzzles. I make jigsaw puzzles, and then I have made several puzzle games. So my expansiveness on puzzles is because I love puzzles. That's my passion. So for me, I could be working, recently I was working on putting together a crossword puzzle that I'm hoping to get published. I also have jigsaw puzzles that I have put together, and then we go through the whole steps of how they get to the actual puzzle that's in the store, to, talking about puzzles when it comes to educating and digital content. And when that happens, I put them down on paper, and then they're given to teachers, and then the teachers put them into their classrooms based on particular topics. So my puzzleness is far and spans quite a range, and I just love it because puzzles are something you can put together and you have to really think about it. But the thing about puzzles too is that when I put them together, I'm not successful unless you can solve them and smile. That's what success is. So it doesn't matter if we're talking a jigsaw puzzle or a word search game. What I have to think about is my end result, which is you. So when I work on my brain bafflers, and I have been doing brain bafflers every week for over 25 years. It's a syndicated newspaper column. And I have to sit down and I have to put words in a topic together that if you thought of one or two of these words, you think of that topic. For example, let's say you're thinking about a kitchen. I'd have to have toaster or spoons or forks so that you would identify that they were actually in a kitchen. So you have to come up with those word lists, and then you got to put together in the puzzle. And all this time I'm thinking about you. How are you going to solve it? And then for my brain baffler, the thing about this puzzle that's special to me, besides the fact I make it, is the idea that the leftover letters equal the answer. So you may find all the stuff that's in the kitchen, but you won't know it's the kitchen until you actually figure out and transpose those letters around to say the word kitchen.
So how did you get into this field? First of all, how long you've been doing it for? And then two, how did you kind of navigate your way into this field? Because that's something where I have friends that on the side will create a board game or something like that, right? I think go through that process and throw it on GoFundMe or whatever, but it's a side project for them. So walk us through, did you want to do this your whole time? Was this a goal? Was it something you kind of navigated to and kind of happenstance? Walk us through that a little bit if you could, Jodi.
Well, I've been doing puzzles for over 30 years. And when I say doing puzzles, I started just like you would. I played puzzles. I enjoyed creating and making games with the games that I was playing with. But how I started it was that I didn't learn to read till I was 16 in the library. And I didn't learn to read because of the way I grew up. We didn't go to school. So when I went to the library, there were several different ways I learned to read. One is I had a tutor. I also was able to look at picture books. And as I understood the language, I understood English, I recognized that there was one way I could challenge myself. And as I challenged myself with games and puzzles, then no one else could tell that I couldn't read very well. No one else could tell I had a problem. And I was really inspired by what I learned from puzzles. And to me, it was an exciting thing to start. So, not being someone who learned to read a traditional way, it really helped spur me. So that's how I got started into puzzles. I was
Interesting.
introduced in a very simplistic way. And I always tell people that, when we look at our alphabets, those are symbols. And as we look at these symbols, we combine them into a language. And that's as simple as a puzzle could be. That's what a puzzle is putting them in the right way so we understand each other. So for me, it came as a very natural existence. But as I grew on, I recognized, especially for National Puzzle Day, that I liked puzzles and I wanted to share that with other people because I didn't have anybody around me who liked puzzles as much as I did. And so that is actually a very humble beginning of how it started. And then from there, I started to make puzzles for the National Puzzle Day for other people to play. And as they started to play them, I became more involved and more excited. And, people challenged me. I would get these letters saying, did all your puzzles? Are you going to do any other ones? So I would be like, okay, I'll do more puzzles. And so from there, that's how I started. But I will say that along the road, at times I had to stop making puzzles and do other jobs, rent jobs, money to have food on the table jobs. But I've always had a real big passion. And so I see something and I try different puzzles and I wonder, can I make them? And that's how I've become a person who makes puzzles every day, like today.
That's fascinating. So, what's the not that they're easy, but what's the quote unquote easiest type of puzzle to make, and which is the hardest?
Wow, that is a really good question. I mean, it depends on who you are. You got to remember that puzzles are different for everyone. For me personally, the hardest ones for me to make is the crossword puzzles. And I
Okay.
see that people who love crossword puzzles, they can tear them apart in less than 30 minutes. And they can really figure out the clues and everything. They're so tuned to it. So for me personally, that's the hardest one for me to make. Um, but there are other ones. I think it has to have a challenge to it as you develop the puzzle. It's not like you just sit down and you go I'm going to do a crossword puzzle. There's so much research that goes into how to describe something that someone like yourself could actually go, is she talking about blah, blah, blah? Or give you a little hint that might throw you off. Or if you're not a history buff, may make you have to stop and go, oh my goodness, I have to think about my history. Is she talking about this clue or is she talking about that clue? So when you're putting it together, how tough it is depends on how tough I want to make it for you. And that's, but crossword puzzles, for me in particular, I have to spend extra time on because I want to make them as challenging as possible. But I've seen people take my crossword puzzle and have it done in 20 minutes or less, and it's mind blowing. You're like, are you kidding me? Took me 4 hours to do this. What are you talking about? So it's all on how much skill set the other person has and how much skill set you have when you're actually looking at the puzzle that you do.
I said I was going to ask you about how long does it take to do a crossword puzzle on average. You mentioned 4 hours there. I'm assuming some might take a little bit shorter, some might take a little bit longer based on complexity here.
Yeah.
I do, but piggyback into that, I do want to tie into your. I say day to day, but it's really a week to week. So if someone is out there and be like, I love puzzles too, Jodi, I want to be a puzzle maker. Like, walk us through what your week actually looks like. Like, how much research you mentioned research, how much research you do, and how much time you clearing your head and trying to be creative. Walk us through what an actual work week might look like for you.
Okay. Well, I have to look at the week to week on what puzzles I might do. I do three different things. First of all, I don't just make puzzles. I also interact with people so that way they can, I can find out more information from them. And then also my puzzles have to be proofread and edited. So I have to make adjustments. So basically it starts out with what kind of puzzles am I going to do for the week? Recently, I had to do a bunch of my brain bafflers for an upcoming month because I do them month to month. So I sit down and figure out what is the word structures for these puzzles. And then from there, I actually have graphs. I sit down and I put the words into the graphs, and then I type them up, and then I go over them, and then someone else goes over them. So for a batch of maybe 10 or 15, it'll take me half a day or 2 days to a day to do. From that point, I have other responsibilities. For example, I work with libraries and integrating puzzles into their communities. So I sit down with them and say, okay, what puzzles do your community like? What do they like? Now you may think to yourself, oh, everybody likes jigsaw puzzles. Not everybody does, or everybody likes crossword puzzles. No, no, no. So when you go to a community, you have to say, okay, what kind of puzzle fits this community? So, I work with the librarians, I talk to the puzzle stores, I do lots of research on what puzzles fit where, and I try to help them. So that's part of my week. Another part of my week is like just right now. I talk to high school kids, I talk to grade school kids, I go to libraries, I speak to kids about puzzles because I think they're cool. Like I've always thought that. And I want to share that with people. So I, go in and bring in my puzzles. I have a new game that is a puzzle game I share and play with them. So that's, I try to set up a couple of those a week to do. And then after all that's done, that's the first part of the week. Then I have to go back to research. Research is a viable portion of my job, and I actually really love it. And that's because, let's say we're going to make a jigsaw puzzle and we want it to be all about trees. Well, my job starts as a consultant to figure out, okay, if I'm going to make a jigsaw puzzle, how many pieces is it going to be? Who's going to be playing this puzzle? How are we going to print it? Is it going to be in the United States? Are we going to send it to Asia? Where is this going to go? Who's going to buy this puzzle? And what is this puzzle going to look like? And believe it or not, there's so many elements to how a puzzle must look so that it connects to the actual person. And the reason it's all important is because when you play a jigsaw puzzle, it's not like you're just shoving a little piece in a hole. People actually have an emotional experience as they put the puzzle together. They may be focusing on themselves. They could be focusing on the puzzle. Perhaps they're just trying to forget the world. So you want to make sure that every piece that goes into there has the perfect fit, and it all comes together and fits into a perfect photograph or illustration or whatever it might be. So that is one of the things that I continuously do, because I work with a lot of jigsaw manufacturers who are looking for puzzles that they can, sell to the public and what they want to do. Another thing that I do almost on a weekly basis is I have to sit down and update my websites. I've got all these different puzzle websites. So I play and make puzzles all the time, whether it's my brain bafflers or my word search puzzles or crossword puzzles. When they're done being proofed and an editor has looked through them, my job is to take those back, make adjustments if needed, and then from there I upload them to my websites and I put them out for people to actually play for free. And so all of that is continuously updated, and it's hard work and it's a lot of work to update a website. But the cool thing about all my websites is that I get people who email me and say, hey, I did this puzzle, or I did that puzzle, I love it, thank you. And I also have students that play it and teachers who give them to students. So for me, I have a lot of puzzle stuff going on. And then there's something that I think is very important, which is that balance. You have to work very hard, but you also have the balance. So usually on Fridays, but sometimes on Mondays, depending on the weekend, I haul down to the Pacific Ocean, and me and my puppy, we scooter back and forth because I just absolutely adore my little scooter. Me and the dog have little helmets, and we just wheel back and forth a bit, and we take it in, because you have to find your creativity. And wherever that might be to make puzzles, you need to find it. And so for me, I'm always exploring things. And when you make puzzles, even like with crossword puzzles, you have to think about these clues. I have to learn so much history to figure out clues to trick you to think about how to solve this puzzle. So for me, it's really great to escape for a little bit and think about what and who might be playing my puzzles next. And the boardwalk is a great place, because when you're scootering along, you meet people from all over the world. They come here to vacation, and they have their thing going on, and you hear their conversations, and sometimes it really spurs a creative juice on you. You're like, oh, I got to go back and write this. So it's the balance of the week.
It's funny, I mentioned offline, my brother's in LA right now, and he put a picture on Instagram of him at the beach. Right, he's hanging out there having lunch or something. So it's funny you say that, but that's his break for it right now. So side question here. I've had friends who have gone through, not the puzzle, but working in an industry where they love, say, sports, and then they get into the sports industry, and sports is their day-to-day job. And they need a break from sports, even though that is their hobby, that's their escape. I'm assuming not, because you're passionate about the way you're talking, but do you find yourself doing fewer puzzles now because you are consumed with it all the time? Or does the break you take, like you just described, scootering down at the beach, does that give you the break you need to?
For making puzzles, I do it day to day, and I don't get to play as many as I would like. I really don't. I also find when I go to a speed puzzling competition, or when you throw 20 or 30 pieces of a jigsaw puzzle on the table, that I can visually put the pieces together. It's far too fast than if you would sit down and you would just be playing a normal puzzle. So I find some days that I'm disappointed in myself that you're already solving it because you know the back end of how to create it. But I don't not do them. I just don't do as many. And like I said, I was invited recently to a speed puzzling event, and I'm like, you know what? It's not really fair, because I think puzzles. I know exactly how these will go together. So I probably could go much quicker than you could. It's because it's my job. That's your professional job. So I don't do as many, but I love some of the new ones that are coming out from the big newspapers, and I love challenging myself on those until I figure out what their formula is, and then I hope they have a new one that comes out.
Excellent. What's the hardest part about breaking into the field? Like if someone wants to do this, what's the biggest challenge they're gonna have to overcome right from the get-go?
I would say the biggest challenge, if you wanted to be a puzzle maker, is figuring out where exactly you fit. And I don't mean that like as a pun, but for real. There are some people who just want to make a jigsaw puzzles, and there is plenty of space there for people to do it. But do you want to make jigsaw puzzles out of cardboard, or do you want to make it out of wood? Or perhaps you want to make them small, or do you want to make them large? So it's really about niching it down to what really appeals to you. There's a lot of room in the jigsaws. There's also a lot of room when it comes to like the word type puzzles. Lots of room. There are so many people that are walking, and you probably have walked by somebody who makes who makes crossword puzzles, because so many people do make them, and so many people do play them. So the best way to break in is to create some, share them with your community, get feedback, especially if it's a word type game or a jigsaw kind of game, and see where yours compares with other people. And if you have a favorable comparison, then bring it to those places where they actually sell them or they buy them, and see what the response is. That is really the best way to start, because there are a number of creative people out there, but they never try because they just they're uncomfortable with placing their work out there. But with puzzles, you have to. People don't know me, but they play my puzzles, and sometimes that makes me nervous, because you're like, oh, what if they don't like it, or what if their problem is with it, or whatever. But once they play it, if they like it, then they're going to want more. And that's how you build it out. That's how I built out the brain baffler. First is one, they said yes, then another one, and another one. And then you're consistent. Consistency is extraordinarily important in the puzzle business. If they didn't have a puzzle every day in the New York Times, people would be really huffing upset. So you have to be consistent, It's really, really important.
So what would that look like in practicality if, let's just say, an 18-year-old want to sit down? We'll just use crossword puzzles as an example. So you mentioned you get feedback, right? You'll work with libraries and say, hey, what types work in here? So if they want to, say, drop some off, try to get some feedback and work through those kinks, do you print it on a sheet of paper? Do you print it somewhere else? Do you make them online exclusively? And then how do you gather the feedback from there if someone wants to do that initial feedback round?
So in particular for puzzles and word games, there are two distinct ways, both of which you mentioned. You could do it online, or you could actually do it on paper. When you start out, I always encourage people to do it on paper. And here's why. You have a piece of paper, you're walking down the street, you would not know if someone did or did not play crossword puzzles. But when you find someone who does, you want to hand them that puzzle so that they can play it. A lot of people are not willing, especially for newbies, to look you up and then work with your interface and then give you feedback. They want to take that puzzle and they want to go to the donut shop, sit down, have themselves a cup of coffee and play. And then they'll give you feedback. They'll write it on the side. I like this. I don't like that. Then collecting that feedback. There's really great places where you can get feedback very easily when you start making your puzzles. The puzzle stores, they have little groups of different people who love trying new things. And that's where you would start. You would take those to the puzzle stores. You could take them to the libraries. Now you could also do it online. That way you'd have like a more national or international interface for feedback. The problem is that if you're doing a crossword puzzle, you will have to buy a program so that you can make the proper diagram. You can't do a diagram that you could do on your computer at home. So you have more limitations. Not impossible, but more limitations. So when you're looking at the different puzzles, you need to figure out what software you're going to be using and how you build off of that. Because if you have the creative idea, all you have to do is fit the software and the framing around that. And that really is what it comes down to. And for things like crossword puzzles, there's several different programs that you can use to build them out. But at that point, as a beginner, you need people to play them. You need to get feedback. How hard or easy are these? Because as you might know, in the New York Times, every day is a different level of easy to hard. And you need to know where your level is. So that way you can either embrace it, move up or down, and try to figure out how you can sell it. So all of those things are very important to think about. But you really have to think about what's your software, because you have the idea, you build around it. Instead of some jobs, you show up and all the tools are there, You don't have the tools to start with. You start with the idea, and then you do the tools.
That's really cool. There's all these things that I would never. You kind of think it's going to be harder than it is, but all the intricacies that you've kind of plowed through over the years, like this stuff is super interesting to me. How these things go into, jigsaw puzzle. I like jigsaw puzzles. My wife does not. I just got a spinny table downstairs that I finished putting together right for the table here. But that's one of those things where I would look at it and go, well, they just take a picture and they cut the mold and boom, send it off here. And what you're describing is so much more complex than that, right? You're looking at visuals and trying to figure out all the dynamics to it. I think it's so cool. What do you like, Jodi? What do you like most about your work?
I have to say that what I love most is that I get to connect with people who love puzzles as much as I do. And I find that to be very humbling. There are jobs in this world, I've even had a few part-time jobs where people didn't even see me even though I was working with them. But when it comes to my passion of puzzles, I can play puzzles and I can make puzzles and other people make them. And recently, one thing that happened that was so cool was we were doing National Puzzle Day stuff, and it's really busy, and there's always phone calls, and I have a lot of signings and all this kind of stuff. And I'm looking on Facebook, and I'm trying to ignore all the pressure because it was really bad, and I had to do an interview. You have to put your thoughts in line and make sure you sound smart and all of that. And I'm rolling through the Facebook, and I stop, and I see this picture of 8 senior citizens playing my puzzle at their facility in Pennsylvania. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, that brought me back to the realization that I do it because I love puzzles and I love to share it. And that is the most important thing. And when you see people play your puzzles or see people come together to play puzzles on National Puzzle Day, you're like, wow, you have made a difference. There is an impact here that I would never thought. From my background, from where I came from, how I grew up, it was a very abusive situation, to today where I can be part of society. I've overcome quite a bit of stuff, and I'm still working on things, but I'm humbled that I get to be part of the big world.
It's lovely. There's so much joy you're bringing to people's lives, and that's the best part of it. So I was going to ask you what the most rewarding part of your career is later, but I'll just assume that's the answer. You can correct me if I'm wrong later. How about the most tedious part? So I would normally say worst, but every job, regardless of how great it is, has some of those things that it could be admin stuff that you just like, I wish someone else would do this for me. What's the most tedious or worst part about your profession?
I would have to say that's the proofreading. It really is. Doesn't matter what puzzle we're working on, whether we're doing a jigsaw puzzle, whether we're doing a word puzzle, because the proofreading, it means someone else goes over it. And then it comes back to me with any corrections or concerns and that type of thing. It's very tedious. It's tedious for 2 reasons. One is I don't want to screw up and make you disappointed in my puzzle. So you've got that in the back of your head. You're going through those like a little alarm bells, like don't make it up. You got to have it right. So you have that problem. Also, for me personally, I grew up in a way I didn't go to school. So I started learning to read when I was 16. So sometimes there are words in our vocabulary that mess me up. Let me give you an example. The word verses. Verses, as if you're listening to a song, is ES. If you're doing a lawsuit, it's US on the end. So those kinds of things I get very nervous about, very tedious. That's why I have a proofreader. That's why I have an editor. But even so, when it comes back, I'm on my phone. Okay, how do we spell verses? And what's the definition of this? And it's very tedious because the bottom line is if a puzzle goes out and it doesn't have, if it's missing one letter, it's a disappointment to you. So that tediousness, I take that serious. It's a serious responsibility that you might have a bad time if it's not perfect. And not everyone's perfect. I mean, I've messed up a couple. I mean, just a couple. But still, it just freaks you out inside. You want to do your best. It doesn't always do that. So it's very tedious. Nothing goes out of this. Nothing that I work on that's a puzzle is not played less than 6 times or does not leave my computer. It has to be played 6 times. 5 of those times have to be by someone other than me. And I usually play it 3 or 4 times to be that one time because I want to make sure, but it's very tedious. If someone says, oh, I find the next letter and they're joking, it's a problem because I need to know it's perfect. So I think that's probably the most tedious. But once it's out, once you know you've done your best, and you have to have a time cutoff. You've 5 people looked at it, you've looked at it, you think it's the best, you wish it well, you say a prayer, kick it out the door, because keeping it around and then freaking it out about it is not good. What's good is that you do your very best, no matter what you do in life. If you have good intentions and you do your best, things will happen positive for you. It's when you kind of throw some time into it, but not, you figure out your process, you do your best, and you kick it out. And it's just very tedious to make sure every puzzle is the best it can be.
Very good. And I'm a master at asking 2 questions at one time. People hate that, but I'm gonna hit you with this, Jodi. So let's say someone goes through, they do the initial feedback. So they create their first thing and they drop it off, they get some feedback, they refine that a little bit, and they are now ready to quote unquote break into the field. So the 2-part question is, what's the most challenging part about breaking into it as a full-time career? Second part of that is, can you offer any tips for people to kind of either overcome those or just tips in general navigating the career?
All right. I think the hardest part is the fact that there's not a lot of professional puzzle makers. There's a lot of part-time people who do 1 or 2 over a couple of year span, but there's not a lot of professionals. And partly is because it takes a lot of time to do puzzles. So if it's your income, you want to push it out there. So I think that's the biggest thing, finding those people, which bleeds into your second question, the tips. When you're ready to put your puzzles out, whether that in whatever kind of content you have, you need to align yourself with people that you believe would either play your puzzle or appreciate your puzzle. That's true with writing too. Who would read your writing, that type of thing. So you're having to align yourself. So if you have a crossword puzzle, you're definitely not going to go to like the jigsaw puzzle store. You just can't. It won't work. So aligning yourself is important. Now, you may or may not know this, but the New York Times every year open their submissions up, and you can submit your crossword puzzles to them. That would be a way to start. Other people also have small submission windows, and again, it's an opportunity for you to submit them. There are places that are interested in puzzles that are not traditional places. Blogs sometimes are interested. Educators are interested. Sometimes you can put together activity packets. That's another place you can do it. So when you're looking at puzzles, part of the problem is there's not a lot of puzzle makers. And if you want to be, you need to align yourself with those pockets of people who are. And you'll also notice that puzzles are becoming more and more prominent everywhere, whether that's LinkedIn, because LinkedIn now has a puzzles and games section, or if you are actually looking at like a job application where they're starting to throw little puzzles and games to see how much you think things through on the bottom. So those are kind of places that you can actually create puzzles and sell to people, and they incorporate it into whatever they're doing. So those are the kind of tips I would give. Look at puzzles as a piece of content and where might it fit, and align yourself with those people in the field that work full time. The part-time people, they aren't any less passionate. They are probably equally as passionate. The problem is they're not actively pursuing publication. They're doing it because they have other things going on. That's cool too. But it's just a matter of really aligning yourself.
Some great advice. Thank you for that. What are some common misconceptions? You might have answered this already, but common misconceptions. I gave you one, right? Look at a picture, jigsaw puzzle, stamp it, ship it out the door. We could talk about jigsaw. You could talk about anything. Well, what's a common misconception about being a puzzle maker?
Well, about a puzzle maker. Well, everyone thinks
you could extend it. You can extend it out to kind of whatever kind of fits.
I think a common misconception about puzzle makers is everybody thinks you're sitting on your computer using AI. I mean, that does not happen. If you want these puzzles to be fun, if you want these to be something that you're going to play, that someone out there is going to play, it cannot come from a computer. It actually has to come from somebody, a person. So I have a lot of people ask me how much time I use AI. I don't. So there you go. So I think that's one common misconception. I think another common misconception about puzzles in general, which I always find funny, is people sometimes, I tell them I'm a puzzle maker, I tell them I'm a founder of National Puzzle Day, and they go, I hate puzzles. I'm just thinking, okay. But do you realize that if you hate puzzles, you hate traffic, you hate cafeterias? Because that's a line, that's a puzzle maze that you got to get through to get your food to the cafeteria. There's all these things that we are using as common day occurrences that are actually puzzles. whether that's a maze, whether that's traffic. Traffic is just bouncing around. That's nothing short of an adult game as we get to where we need to go safely. So I always find it funny when people declare that they hate puzzles. Yes, you may, but you may not know that the world is tricking you because there's puzzles everywhere. So I think it's a common misconception that puzzles mean you have to be smart. They mean you have to like just one kind. With 900 puzzles, you can like something that's all about math or all about words or all about visual illusions. There's so many types. So it's not just about one particular one. So I always tell people, well, before you think that jigsaws are not your cup of tea, check out the rest of them. The jigsaws are great, but there are a lot of great puzzles. So I think there's a lot of misconception that puzzles means that you have to sit down and that you're all by yourself and you're all, you're maybe even old and you're just like, oh, we're doing these puzzles. But no, they're not. There's something for everyone. They're used in schools every day. They're used in our jobs. They're how we figure things out. They're also how we relax. So I always tell people, don't be too hard on the puzzles. I mean, I know I'm a bigger cheerleader than most people, but don't go dragging them down that far.
That's okay. I like the analogy to traffic, right? It's just a big game of Frogger at that point, right? You're just moving in a different direction.
Safe Frogger. Yeah.
How about something about your industry that you wish you knew a little bit sooner?
Goodness. You know what? I really wish I would have known the people I know in the puzzle business sooner than I do now. They're really great people, but everyone's independent, doing their own thing. They have their own path. It's very creative. It's a creative job. So one of the things is that you might meet people in passing, but they're off and doing their thing and you're off doing your thing. I just wish there was like a puzzle maker convention kind of thing where we could all just talk about our experiences, because I really think that we could help each other. But unfortunately there isn't. And because there's so few people that do them full time, we're so busy with our jobs and how we're doing it that we don't have a lot of time to share with other creators. And it is also competitive too. Once you have a puzzle someplace that's doing really well, you don't want someone else to sneak in and take over. So I just wish that there was more, I don't know, social existence in some ways.
Do you see a light at the end of the tunnel with more people trying to build a community around that than, say, 5-10 years ago? Or is it about the same where you don't have as many full-time people? The competitive people are a little standoffish because they don't want you ripping them off. Like, do you find the community getting more close-knit, or is it about static where it was, back in the day?
I think people are getting closer. I do. I also think puzzle players are demanding that puzzle makers come together, because look at how, like with jigsaw puzzles, look how speed puzzling and the Great Puzzle Race and all of these kind of competitive things have come together, and you have to be a puzzle maker to be involved in that. So it's bringing people out of their shell. And keep in mind, if you're a creator, you're really focused on your research, making sure your puzzles are perfect, getting them out right. Sometimes you don't think about, well, the next step, which is going out into the public or dealing with your colleagues or that kind of thing, because you have deadlines, you have to keep going. But I do think it's changing. I think it's evolving in a really positive way. And if it was a little faster, it would be great, but it's going at the speed as it's going right now.
Excellent. I'm going to ask you about careers here in just a second, kind of tangentially, but out of all the things we covered today, is there something that you think the audience should know that's really important that I neglected to ask you?
So one of the things that I always tell people when I talk about my career and about my life and everything is that when you find you have a dream, and my dream was puzzles, don't think that you have to fit into some sort of box that it will come to. I've been puzzling for years, and I still haven't gotten to where I want to be, but it's about the journey. I mean, it's really about how I have impacted people with my puzzles and helping other people share puzzles with other people. And if you put that really on a simple perspective, don't get so caught up in your dream that you forget you're looking on both sides of the windows and seeing where you're going. Because I think if you do, it'll not only empower you further to get there faster, but it will keep you going in what you want to do. Because sometimes life throws you curveballs. Sometimes things happen and there's not anything you can do about it. And you have to look at your dream and go, okay, but I have to go do this because I'm an adult or I'm responsible. So I always tell people, when it comes to my puzzles and all of that, it's taken time. A lot of people think it's overnight. No, it's not.
Yeah.
And so whatever dream you might have, keep plugging at it. Don't just think, okay, I can't work on it this week, so I'm giving it up. So I think it's always very important to point out, because puzzles have not been an overnight success. National Puzzle Day celebrated its 30th year this year. That is phenomenal. I can't believe I'm 31 years old, but also phenomenal that for 30 years people have been playing puzzles, and I've had a very small portion of that. But if I would have given up 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago when I got hit by a car when I was crossing the street, that would have meant that those 5 years were empty. So I always encourage people, just keep pushing. It may not be as much as you want. You may not be satisfied with the results. But at the end of the day, it's still yours to have if you take it. And what you need to take is your dream and your success.
Very well said. Very well said. Beautiful. So Jodi, I'm going to ask you a different career question, but we were chatting offline, and you mentioned earlier that, hey, when you get into it, like the money's not there right away. You got to build up, like everything else, right? You got to build up into it. We're talking about jobs. You said you talk to high school kids all the time. You were talking about jobs that kind of sustain you through some of those years. Can you share? You mentioned that you have a story that your audience tends to love when you tell it. So would you mind telling that story?
I would love to. I've not always been a puzzle person. In fact, when it comes to my skills, the way we grew up, I have limited skills. So maybe even that's small. I try really hard, but it doesn't always work. And this is the thing about jobs. Sometimes jobs don't fit. No one told me that as a young adult. Nobody did. So I've had jobs where I've done really poorly on, like where you're out being the caddy lady for a group of people and they forget to tell you that the golf cart has a brake and you don't take the brake on and it falls down into a little hole. I've been in jobs where, a 3-day carny thing where you're making French pastries, and I'm so nervous that my contact lens fell into the batter. I mean, these are things where you just don't get very well paid. Not at all. But one of the things I've noticed is if you follow jobs and things that, you're following your dream, but you also have jobs in your life that you like, that you pursue, it will work out very well for you. And I remember as a young kid, one of the things that my family did is we went to Disneyland. And we went to Disneyland, it was so long ago that there was a parking lot underneath the monorail. And I remember looking up at the monorail and seeing the monorail pilot and how smiley this guy was, and they had balloons in the monorail. And I thought to myself, someday I'm going to learn how to drive a monorail. Now that was maybe before 11. So yeah, you think like that and you think, okay, then life shows up and it rolls by real fast. And then you got all these responsibilities. And then about 6 years ago, somewhere in there, I had a break in my career where puzzles weren't doing very well. Writing wasn't doing very well. There was all these weird stuff going on. I thought, you know what? I remember that promise that I was going to go and I was going to learn how to drive the monorail. So me and my doggie packed up my car and we drove to Orlando. And I learned how to drive the monorail at the Walt Disney World monorail and at the resort. It was an experience I've never, ever had before. Now, keep in mind, I'm not real good eye-hand coordination. I already said I lost a few golf carts. And I'd had trouble with how things worked and pushing buttons and remembering sequences. And it was one of those moments where I was just like, I don't know if I'll get through training. And it was so amazing to have this moment where you dream about doing something. And then you decide, hey, I should go try this. What do I have to lose? So being able to drive a monorail around like the Epcot and around Walt Disney World and Magic Kingdom and learning how and what happens there was such an amazing experience. And not only did I learn to drive the monorail, I also learned how to engage with people on a level I never knew I could. You'd have hundreds, if not thousands of people standing on a platform freaking out because they wanted to get to Magic Kingdom and the monorail was late. And you had to entertain, you had to engage, you had to believe that you could have a good day with them. And Disney taught me a lot about customer service and all these things I didn't know I needed to do and didn't understand how to do before I showed up there. And it was an amazing experience. At one point I was like, especially when I left, I'm going to be a monorail pilot for the rest of my life. That's what I thought. Then about 18 months in, I woke up one day and I thought, oh my God, we just go in an oval. I got to get out here. So I moved back to Los Angeles. But when I moved back, I promised myself that I would not just put that in the back of your head. Because we all have bucket lists. Well, we want to go do this. Oh, we want to go do that. Well, because of the way I grew up, there's so much time that was lost. I try not to to put it in a bucket. I try to put it in a Rolodex and get it out as quickly as possible. So when I came back to Los Angeles, I really missed driving the monorail. And so what I decided to do is I did a whole monorail course teaching kids that there's like 162 variants of different monorails and how fast they go and why they do this, that, and the other. And it was really wonderful. But the thing about the monorail that's so amazing is that when you are the little pilot, you got your little uniform, you get in your little bubble, you push your little button, and you go. And you can see for a distance, and all the things that you can see, whether that's trees or people, or there you even see alligators sometimes, and you could see deer, and you could see the platform coming up. It gave you this sense of accomplishment that you thought about it as a little girl, you did it today, and you can do anything you want tomorrow. And I really think that that's really important for everybody to think about. If there's something you want to do today and you can accomplish it, then what can you do tomorrow? Probably twice as good as what you could have done today. You know why? Because you have that experience already. It's just a matter of pushing out that direction. So I always share with people that I am one of the 1,500 monorail pilots in the United States, but I don't have a monorail.
So that's an awesome story. Question here. Like, is that something you just sign up for and they'll train you? Do you have to be employed by them before and then roll into, like, how do you go the process being like, hey, I want to be trained on how to drive a monorail?
Yeah, if you too want to be a monorail driver, you can do this. And it's really kind of fun. What you do is you apply to the Disney World Resort. They have a process. You go through a program. They teach you everything about monorails and then some. Plus, they teach you how to interact with guests and how you handle issues and problems and how you are smiling at people and what you say and what you don't say. It's a really good program that they put you through. And then once you're done, then you start working on the monorail, meaning you get people inside the monorail, you get people outside of the monorail, and you also learn how to drive it. So it's a program anyone can do. It is not a exclusive thing. It's just something I wanted to do. Now, I say Disney World Resort because that's in Orlando. They don't do that at the other parks. The other parks are more of a button kind of thing because they're considered an attraction. And the difference between an attraction and an actual piece of transportation is in Orlando, the pilot can stop the monorail at any point. They have full access and reign on the actual vehicle. The vehicle is run in a control center that's off-site. So electronically, it's run by them, but also the monorail pilot, they're the person who actually does all the driving. In places like Anaheim and other places, that is not the case. It's different.
Okay.
They actually are a ride that is controlled in an outside source. So it was one thing I really wanted to learn how to drive it. I really wanted to be able to wear the uniform. It was just one of those fluke things that I saw as a kid, and I thought, if this person's happy, I can be happy this way too. And it's remarkable. But if you wanted to try it, it's available to do. All you have to do is go down there. You can even do it online and put in your application.
That's so cool. I learned something new. Every single one of these podcasts, someone tells me some tip I had no idea about. This blows my mind. So this is so cool. All right, last question for you, Jodi. You can't be a puzzle maker. You can't do anything with puzzles. I'm taking monorail conductor off the list now because you told me that story.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to choose a different career, which would you choose and why?
I would definitely go with, it would have to be a boat captain.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah, I love mechanical things. I have I've got scooters. I've got all sorts of things with wheels at my house. I'm crazy about how things work, how they come together. I would definitely say a boat captain, but not just any boat captain. I want a big barge, one with lots of stuff on it so that we can get across the ocean. And when we get there, people will be happy to see us. So I would want a barge captain kind of thing. Awesome. I find that all of our transportation that we use as humans are absolutely fascinating. I just think it's so spectacular on how we have come to move things around our earth. And when we do this, we use all types of vehicles and machines to make it the best it can be.
It's awesome. First boating one I've gotten. So check it off the list for you. So
awesome.
Jodi, it was a pleasure having you today. Thanks for all the feedback. Thanks for sharing your story with us. Thanks for giving tips to the listeners here. If someone wants to reach out, ask you a question, find out more about National Puzzle Day, what's best ways for someone to get a hold of you?
Well, I don't encourage anyone to yell out the window, but if you want to get a hold of me, you can definitely check me out at puzzledayfun.com. That's the official website of National Puzzle Day. Or you can check out my free puzzles, which is puzzles2play.com. Also, if you want to get in touch with me, just drop me a line. My information is over in both of those websites, so you're absolutely welcome to stop by and say hi.
Excellent. Jodi Jill, everyone, to find out more about her National Puzzle Day, everything she just mentioned, check out the show description. We'll link all that stuff down there for you as well. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to share your career with us, we'd love to have you. Just check out our website to find out more. And until next time, be kind to one another. Unboxing careers, unboxing.